Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are mapping out what I'd call a pretty incredible musical paradox.
It really is.
We are taking a single Wikipedia article and tracing how a highly specific folk sound, a sound originally played by rural Italian shepherds, completely hijacked the high society concert halls of Baroque Europe.
Yeah, hijacked is the perfect word for it.
Right. So our mission today is to explore a genre known as the pastoral.
And it's a fascinating trajectory to track, We are going to look at the mechanical anatomy of this genre, follow its historical footprints from the rolling hills of southern Italy all the way to 18th century Sweden.
Wow.
And we'll try to understand exactly why this specific auditory profile became the ultimate shorthand for nature and tranquility across the entire continent.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to establish the structural definition first because the architecture of this music really dictates its entire history.
Right, the foundation is everything here.
Yes, exactly. At its core, a pastoral refers to something of a pastoral nature in music, which can manifest either in the overarching form of the piece or simply in its mood. But when we drill down into the Baroque era, the building blocks become highly rigid. We are looking at a melody moving in thirds, played over a drone bass.
Right. And you know exactly what a drone bass does functionally. It's that continuous, sustained note anchoring the bottom end of the harmony.
Like a bagpipe.
Exactly like a bagpipe. But in the context of the pastoral, it does more than just hold the chord progression together. It acts as a sonic tether to the earth.
Oh, I like that. A sonic tether.
Yeah, it gives that later dancing melody in thirds a fundamentally rustic foundation. It mimics the physical mechanics of traditional folk instruments, which we will discuss, but mathematically it creates this grounded, hypnotic space.
Which totally contrasts with the highly complex counterpoint that was popular in the courts at the time.
Exactly. It was a completely different vibe.
And the timing of that dancing melody is just as strictly defined. We are consistently looking at compound meters, specifically 6/8, 9/8, or 12/8 meter. Crucially, it is executed at a moderate tempo, which brings up what I think is the most interesting mechanical relationship in this genre. We have to look at the connection between the pastoral and the tarantella.
What's fascinating here is how structurally intertwined they are. The pastoral is essentially a slowed-down version of that frenetic dance.
Really?
Yeah, it utilizes many of the exact same rhythms and melodic phrases that you would find in a tarantella, just pulled back to a moderate, relaxed pace.
Wait, the tarantella is famously chaotic, though. I mean, it is supposed to mimic the frenzy of a spider bite, driving dancers to total exhaustion.
Right, the dancing mania.
So how does taking that specific frantic framework and merely slowing it down result in something peaceful? Doesn't the inherent tension of those rhythmic groupings carry over?
It is a great question, and it highlights how tempo fundamentally alters our psychological processing of rhythm. When you have a rapid 6/8 time, the human brain perceives it as a cascade, a forward-falling momentum that creates physical urgency.
Like you can't stop moving.
Exactly. But when you have that tempo, those same rhythmic groupings stop pushing you forward and start swaying.
Ah, I see.
The triplet feel in a moderate tempo becomes a lilt, so you retain the exact same rhythmic DNA, but the psychological effect shifts entirely from the chaotic energy of a crowded village square to the quiet rhythm of a rolling pasture.
That makes total sense. It is a perfect example of how context changes everything in music.
Completely.
You keep the mechanics but change the velocity, and the emotional resonance flips completely. And that rolling pasture we mentioned isn't just a metaphor, it is the literal origin point.
The literal hillsides of Italy.
Right. Those specific musical building blocks,
Right.
the drone bass, the lilting melody in thirds, were not invented in a fancy conservatory. They were actively mimicking the traditional Christmas music of the pifferari.
Yes, the pifferari.
These were the rural Italian bagpipe and reed pipe players.
And the instrumentation used by the pifferari serves as the acoustic blueprint for the entire classical genre that followed. You have two primary instruments at play in this folk tradition.
Let's get into the actual instruments.
First is the zamponia, the traditional Italian bagpipe. That is your organic source for the continuous grounding drone bass. The physical construction of the bagpipe literally demands a drone.
You literally can't play it without one.
Exactly.
And layered over that zamponia is the piffero. Looking at the technical description provided in the source, it is a primitive, keyless, double-reed oboe-type instrument.
That's the one.
This is the voice carrying those lilting melodies in thirds over the drone. And what stands out when looking at the regional variations are the alternative names for the pifero.
They're great names.
They really are. It's also known as the sciarella, the pipita, or the bifera. I mean, just saying those is rhythmic.
They are, and those localized names highlight something important about the transmission of this music. This was not a standardized academic practice.
Right, no sheet music.
Right. It was a hyperlocal oral tradition rooted deeply in the specific topography and agrarian culture of southern Italy. The shepherds playing the bifera and the zamponia were providing functional, communal music, particularly during the Christmas season.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. How does a localized, primitive, double reed instrument, played by shepherds, become the dominant auditory aesthetic for the wealthiest concert halls in Europe?
It's a massive cultural jump.
Because the sheer volume of major composers who adopted this specific style is staggering. Let's trace this chronologically for you, starting with Arcangelo Corelli.
Corelli is a perfect starting point for the classical integration. We can look specifically at the last movement of his Christmas Concerto, Opus number 8.
Right.
Corelli takes the exact acoustic profile of those pifferari, the drone, the thirds, the compound meter, and formalizes it for a highly trained string ensemble.
He dresses it up.
Exactly. He takes the rough edges off the folk instruments and polishes the underlying harmonic structure for a sophisticated urban audience.
And Vivaldi follows suit. You hear the same structural adoption in the third movement of his Spring Concerto from the Four Seasons.
A piece almost everyone listening has probably heard.
Oh, absolutely. But it isn't just Italian composers pulling from their own geographic backyard. The sound crosses cultural borders entirely. We see Handel utilizing the pastoral in his masterpiece, Messiah.
Specifically, the PIFA movement.
Yes, the PIFA movement.
And the naming of the PIFA movement is a direct, undeniable linguistic link back to the pifferari and the piffero. What is most compelling here is the cultural translation taking place.
Right, because Handel wasn't Italian.
No, you have George Friedrich Handel, a German-British composer, writing an English-language oratorio, and he deliberately reaches for an Italian shepherd motif to convey a universal religious moment. The Italian folk sound has effectively become a pan-European shorthand.
It is an auditory shortcut. If you are a Baroque composer and you needed to establish a scene of rural tranquility or reference the nativity shepherds, you deployed the drone bass and the 6/8 meter.
And your audience instantly got it.
Your audience instantly understood the assignment. Johann Sebastian Bach utilized the exact same technique. We see it in the Pastoral for Organ, BWV 590.
Yes, and Bach's application in his Christmas oratorio is incredibly deliberate and layered.
Tell us about that one.
He uses a sinfonia written in the style of a pastoral to open part 2 of the oratorio. The crucial detail here is how he applies it to the narrative. Bach uses this specific sinfonia to...
Wow.
He is essentially using the shepherd's own musical vernacular to announce the divine to them.
It is a brilliant narrative device.
Yeah.
He basically scores the scene using the diegetic sound of the characters themselves.
Exactly.
You also have Domenico Scarlatti writing examples of the pastoral into his keyboard sonatas, pushing the form into solo instrumentation. And as we transition between the Baroque and classical eras, the French composers adopt it with an almost obsessive fervor.
Obsessive is the right word.
Marc-Antoine Charpentier didn't just write a couple of pastorals. He wrote 8 entire sets of them.
The scale of Charpentier's output in this specific form is a very strong indicator of market demand among the French aristocracy.
Absolutely. Charpentier was so dedicated to the form that he wrote 8 sets. You look at his catalog, and it is just a massive block of pastorals.
It's endless variations.
Right, from H479 through H482, H483, H484, H485, H486, and into H4922 and H493.
It's quite the list.
The French courts clearly could not get enough of this idealized rustic aesthetic. And the influence doesn't stop at the classical era. It pushes right into the Romantic period, with Rossini famously including a pastoral section in his William Tell overture.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a profound shift in European society.
How so?
As these cities grew larger, more industrialized, and increasingly disconnected from agrarian life, the wealthy urban audiences sitting in those grand concert halls developed a deep nostalgia for an idealized, simple, rustic existence.
They missed the nature they were paving over.
Exactly. The pastoral allowed them to safely consume the concept of nature without experiencing any of the actual dirt, cold, or hardship of a shepherd's life. It was pristine, curated escapism.
It was acoustic tourism.
Acoustic tourism, yes.
But the pastoral didn't remain trapped solely in the instrumental repertoire of the orchestra. It actually cycled back into vocal traditions, specifically intertwining with Christmas carols.
It's a seamless transition, really.
There was this direct path from classical instrumental imitation right back into popular vocal music.
We see this distinctly with the widely popular Italian Christmas carol Ti Scendi dalle Stelle.
Written by St. Alfonso Liguori, and it is highly notable that it is sometimes literally titled The Carol of the Bagpipers or Canzone di Zampognari,
Right back to the roots.
which brings the entire musical form full circle, right back to the Zampogna bagpipe that birthed the drone bass in the first place. Pietro Iann's Gesù Bambino serves as another massive vocal example of the genre that maintains those exact structural hallmarks.
But perhaps the most surprising example of how thoroughly this cultural mashup permeated Europe is found far outside the Mediterranean.
The Swedish connection. This is arguably the most fascinating geographic leap we are looking at today.
It really is wild.
We start with Italian shepherds and their reed pipes, and somehow we end up in the Nordic literary scene of the 1790s.
It perfectly illustrates how an auditory aesthetic can detach from its geographic origins and become a universal artistic tool. We are looking at Carl Michael Bellman. He was a prominent Swedish poet and performer.
Okay.
In 1790, he published a song collection titled Fredman's Epistles, and this collection contains several pastorals.
The specific example detailed in the text is Epistle 80, titled Lixum and Hedina, Högtidskledd. That translates to, like a shepherdess, solemnly dressed.
So you have this distinctly Italian musical architecture, the compound meter, the lilting melodies over a drone,
Right.
being utilized to sing about a shepherdess in Stockholm in the 1790s.
And the metal layers go even deeper. Bellman's Swedish song begins with a near paraphrase of the start of Nicolas Boileau-Despreaux's French Guide to the Construction of Pastoral Verse.
Think about the compounding layers of cultural influence there.
It's staggering. It is a Swedish song utilizing a musical form derived from Italian folk instruments, which opens by paraphrasing a French literary guide on how to properly write pastoral poetry.
That is the ultimate European cultural mashup.
It proves that the pastoral life wasn't just a localized Italian trend. It was a continent-wide philosophical and aesthetic movement that everyone wanted to participate in, regardless of their actual climate or geography.
It highlights a shared European desire for an idealized, simple existence. The pastoral mode became a universal language for tranquility, which brings us to a very important point about the nature of this music in the modern era.
So what does this all mean? After filtering through Baroque concertos, French aristocrats, and Swedish poets, it would be very easy to write the pastoral off as a dead relic,
Just a historical curiosity.
right, confined to sheet music archives and academic studies.
But it hasn't died out. The tradition has actually survived the centuries, completely intact in its original environment. Pastorals are still played today in the regions of southern Italy where the Zampogna continues to thrive.
They are still playing the original instruments in the original context.
Precisely. Today, you can still hear the pastoral executed by a solo Zampogna player or accompanied by that primitive keyless piffero.
It's amazing that it survived all of that.
Despite centuries of classical appropriation, evolution, and shifting global tastes, the baseline folk tradition never actually stopped. It remained a functional part of the regional culture.
What is striking about that is the sheer resilience of the acoustic profile. The exact same sonic landscape, the drone bass, the lilting melodies in thirds, is still echoing through the Italian countryside today,
Doing exactly what it always did.
serving the exact same community function it did before Corelli, Vivaldi, or Bach ever put pen to paper. It isn't a historical reenactment. It is a continuous, unbroken line of musical practice.
It is a remarkable testament to the endurance of folk traditions. It serves as a reminder that what we now consider high classical art is very often deeply rooted in the soil of everyday working-class life.
Okay, let's take a step back and recap the territory we have covered in this deep dive.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We started by breaking down the mechanical anatomy of the pastoral. That grounding drone bass, the melody moving in thirds, and the psychological shift of slowing down the compound meter of a tarantella.
From chaos to calm.
Exactly. We traced its origins to the Pifferari playing their rustic zampognas and pifferos on the hillsides of southern Italy. We analyzed how that hyper-local folk sound was formalized by heavyweights like Corelli, Handel, Bach, and Charpentier to create an auditory shorthand for nature in the grand concert halls of Europe.
The whole classical Hall of Fame.
Right. And then we tracked its influence all the way to 18th century Swedish poetry and finally saw how the original tradition remains alive and well today.
And the broader context here is about recognizing a fundamental human pattern. Understanding the pastoral isn't just an exercise in memorizing musical terms or historical dates.
No, not at all.
It is about observing how humans have consistently, across centuries and borders, utilized sound to capture the tranquility of pastoral life. It is an expression of an enduring universal need to connect with, or at least nostalgically recall, the natural world.
It is a mechanism for escapism that predates any form of recorded media.
Exactly. This raises an important question for us to ponder. We have seen how Baroque and classical composers use the specific sounds of the pastoral, the drone bass, the moderate tempo, the melodies and thirds, to capture an idealized vision of nature for their increasingly urbanized audiences.
Right.
It was their way of escaping the density of the city through sound. But what would a pastoral look like if it were invented today?
Oh, that's interesting.
As our modern world becomes overwhelmingly digital, fast-paced, and disconnected from the natural environment, how would contemporary creators translate our current longing for nature and escape into a brand new musical form?
What would that even sound like?
Exactly. What specific sounds, what modern instruments, or even digital noises would become our generation's version of the zampoña and the drone bass?
That is a profound question to leave on. What exactly is the auditory signature of our escape today? I want you to really think about that. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. Keep exploring the material, keep listening critically to the sonic landscapes around you, and stay insanely curious.